We are starting now with the first panel. My name is Frederick Noronha. I am a journalist. I'm the odd man out here. I'm not one of those distinguished people whom Joshua was talking about. I'm just an average person here but I've been following open source and free software for a long time. So my days are when being an open source evangelizer or community member meant being like a Jolawala and going around convincing people to start coding. So we are still doing that, but today's panel has got a whole lot of experienced people from different backgrounds, and I won't cut into their time. We'll go straight to them and we'll listen to what they say. We have time at the end, about 20 minutes for questions. If you feel a pressing need, you can interrupt. If you feel you are saying the wrong thing, you can always interrupt us. But I'll start by requesting our friend, that is Janardan, to tell us something about his experience of getting started. His story is very interesting. You'll know why when you listen to it.
Hello.
What do you?
Welcome all. I am Janardan. I have three identities. I have three identities. I am a movie buff and a Bangalorean. Second is I work at Dell. I am an engineering director at Dell. And the third is I am a JavaScript evangelist, and I am sitting in this chair purely as a third identity what I have as a JavaScript evangelist and nothing else. It started, I run a group, a web developer community called JavaScript Meetup. We are also the community partners for this event. Incidentally, it happened 7 years back, 2015 Open Source India conference. We were two speakers. I heard a member from on Java. He was giving a talk on Java, and I was giving about JavaScript, which drives the web development and the community. So I was giving a talk on ES6. That was the latest feature set and that we had. So the Java speaker said that, hey Janardan, if you are such a great fan of JavaScript, why don't you start a group? He was already running a Java user group, and he was running a community pretty well. I went to meetup.com and checked if there are similar groups. So incidentally, there were at least 5 other groups which were in the similar area, whether web development, Angular, anything related. So I told my mentor, why start yet another one? So he said that, no, don't worry, you just get started. So I drew inspiration a lot from our movies where it's the same story, but they rehash it such a way that everyone loves watching it. So I got inspiration from that, and I started the group. From beginning of 5-member to right now, we are around 12,000 members, 13 cities across the globe. Also during pandemic, we were able to cover much broader spectrum of people. Okay. We run meetups every month. We have a series of events that happen. Monthly, we ensure that at least a company offers a space. We are not-for-profit community, and it's completely community-driven. So that is my background. I have experience in building communities, building leaders in communities, and also I can share experience on, why do we need to contribute to such a community.
So that's very interesting. Janardan is saying that communities can work, but as we go along, we are going to see that it's not so simple and it's not all hunky-dory. There are problems also. The mic is going next to Vanshika Srivastava, and she has not one but 2 interesting stories to tell, both in terms of her background, in terms of women contributing. She has some questions to ask you. So over to you, Vanshika.
Thank you so much for having me here. So before I introduce myself, I just want to check the energy here in the auditorium. So how is the weather of the Bangalore? Shout loud. Great. Okay. And how many of you are students or probably like contributing to open source right now? Okay. Few hands. Great. Good to know. Okay, so today you already know what the track is about. We'll be talking a lot of things within open source, specifically from the community contributions. So hi all, just introducing myself. I am Vanshika. I'm a technology evangelist working at BoxyHQ as DevRel. I'm also plugged in developer communities in Web 2, Web 3, and Cloud Native. And apart from that, also building startups in SaaS ecosystem. And personally, my background happens to be from commerce. a very disappointing, subject choice that I made, according to my parents, but not me. And I think that there's a misconception in a lot of people's head that, if you are from a background like commerce or arts, you can probably not break in tech. This is something that I've been solving through open source, trying to bridge a gap between tech and projects like, in open source. And apart from that, the number of women that I see in the room, you can probably look around and, get to notice that there are not many, right? So I also advocate for women in STEM and trying to, empower women to also start contributing, and at least the preconception that they have that they can probably not do all these things is something I'm trying to solve. So that's just 2 cents to my story. But yeah, we'll cover more of things later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vanshika. The next speaker is Vishal Biyani, who's from InfraCloud. And he's going to also tell us his experiences with community building, maybe some problem areas, his work and how it ties in with the communities.
Cool. Thanks, Frederick. Glad to be here. My name is Vishal, as Frederick said. I'm CTO and founder at InfraCloud Technologies. We were a company born in open source and community primarily. Company starting, and I signed the Pune Kubernetes meetup almost happened at the same time. And we gradually and over time grew to almost like a few thousand members, doing workshops, coaching folks, in these new technologies from very early on. Kubernetes was not even 1.0 when we started. On the other hand, I also maintain a project called Fission. It's a serverless project on top of Kubernetes. And we had another project called BotCube, which we started an internal hackathon in the company. Over time, got a few thousand users using it across the world and got eyes of some VCs and investment as well. So it was a nice, interesting journey of, building something from scratch and taking it to some logical conclusion. So yeah.
From what you are saying, everything looks nice so far, but we know that there are problems with community building. The problems will come out soon when we discuss why it's not happening, how deep the participation is. We'll get to know that. So the next speaker, of course, is Mr. GitHub, as we call him. That is Karan MV. And Karan has some very specific facts and figures. But when we were planning for this meeting, he explained what he sees as contributing. I think that's a very interesting point. Would you like to start with that, Karan?
Sure. Hello. Yes, that's how we wake up people in Bangalore. I'm Karan, and I lead international DevRel at GitHub, basically supporting developers across the world. So I work very closely with the open source ecosystem, the maintainers, the projects, the contributors, and people who are ecosystem enablers, really helping support open source in various different ways as well. And to the point that Frederick mentioned, right, when it comes to things like contributions, I have some numbers to share, which I'll probably try to ask you later on, but I often hear this term that people say as non-code contributions, non-code contributions, non-code contributions. And I feel it could be rephrased better, because whenever you hear the term as non-code contributions, you essentially are putting something which is binary. You're saying that, okay, there's code contribution and there's non-code contribution. What I like to say it as, there are many different types of contributions, with code being one kind of a contribution, etc. So I'll share some more insights around the contributions and community and the open source ecosystem in India once we finish with our introductions.
You can do it now.
We'll probably have the introductions. So thank you so much.
Next in line is Sanil Kumar D from the Soda Foundation.
Soda is interesting, right?
Soda goes with what?
I have only water. Yeah, soda goes with water. Okay, so before I get into introduction, I have a few questions. Just to wake you up. You can see all of us, right? All the panel members is visible from every corner of this hall? I don't think so. Yes, no? Okay.
Are we visible?
I think you should sit there to represent. Okay. So Vanshika was asking that how many of you contribute to open source, right? So some of you raise your hands. You're on the spot now. I just want to ask you, not only you, all of you, what is open source? Because we are going to go into deeper about community building, challenges, what are the values, etc. So what is open source? Open source is not open, is it? Source is open.
So it's
Oh, who's
basically
that?
a
Who's that?
license. Is it basically a license? You're saying that?
Source is open. Who said this? Yeah, maybe I'll stand. I can't see. I can't see all of you. Who said source is open? You attended my session before? Okay. See, basically, open source is nothing but source is open. Karan will not agree with me because he will start talking about licensing. See, in fact, we need to start with simple things, right? Open source means source is open. There are more things to it. We will discuss that. But basic understanding should be that. You don't attach license, free, cost, all these things with that. Okay. So that is one. Second thing is that I think Vanshika missed one point when she talked about women. She had a request. Here, more guys are there, right? Including us. In the panel also you can see the same. Next time when we come, what we should do? Some more girls. Okay, we can bring our girlfriends or wives or wife, right? Okay, so that apart. So myself, Sanil Kumar. I work with Huawei, but I represent Soda Foundation here. I'm a TOC co-chair of Soda Foundation. My experience working with open source starts way back in 2010. With respect to Soda Foundation, because Frederick will stop me if I talk more, I'll talk about the community first. Soda Foundation started in India 2019 from zero. We just started with 2-3 people. Before that, this project was known as OpenSDS. It started in 2016. There was no India entity at that point in time. We started in 2019, and we started working with a small meetup group and started collaborating with CNCF meetup group in Bangalore. That was our first place where we talked about Soda. From there, today, I can confidently say that India community is the top 1 community in the whole world for Soda Foundation. Now, what is Soda Foundation? Nothing to do with the real Soda. Soda Foundation is a sub-foundation under Linux Foundation focusing on data management. Okay, data management, Kubernetes, container world, or multi-cloud, things like that. You can actually compare with CNCF. How many of you heard about CNCF? Good, good. Okay, it is same as CNCF, same level. We also host multiple projects. So in the subsequent discussions, I will try to share that what we have seen when we started working with the community, especially students and young developers. What are the challenges we faced? And what are the key values when you get into open source? We have immense value we can add to our country if you go through open source channel. Thank you so much.
And last, Joshua, Poddoku, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of insights are captured. Don't mind my voice. I think Bangalore weather is so good, so that I got this thing yesterday. So I'm Joshua Poddoku from Marico. So it's a US-based company, and we completely support open source, and I lead open source initiatives for the program Apache DevLake. And we also have few of our contributors here in the audience. Could you raise your hand, please? Yeah. So they are our contributors. Yesterday they pinged me on Slack saying that, we are coming from Chennai to Bangalore just for this event and we'd like to meet you. And that's the essence of community, right? So these all add value and encouragement and, the energy to the community and the culture of open source. And as Sanil mentioned, right, India being one of the top contributors in any of the open source foundations. And we also saw that, Apache DevLake also has Indian community at VAST. So I started a program called Junior Developer Evangelist program, which helps early contributors to understand what is developer evangelism and leadership in open source and convert them to future leaders of open source. And yeah, so I started exploring open source way back in 2018 through attending some meetups like this. I was in the audience and observing things. And in 2020, I started hosting podcasts with the creators of open source because I wanted to know the creator aspect of things, not just the contributor. So I wanted to bring it to the mainstream, right? Creators into the mainstream. That's my aim. And that's how I'm also here. And thanks for the organizers for giving this opportunity to all of us. Yeah.
So great, guys. Maybe we can look next at three aspects. One is the situation as it exists. The next may be the problems, and thirdly, the solutions in brief. To start with the situation, GitHub.
Yeah. So one of the things is, many of them might really be thinking that, hey, open source, great, and there is so much that's happening, etc. Just asking you, do you know how many developers there are in India? Not open source only, but just generally. I know a few of them know the answer to this, but take a guess. Yell it out loud. Okay, someone said 10,000. Anyone else?
It's like an auction.
Sorry?
It's like an auction. It's going.
Oh, like an auction. All right. Yeah. 1 million plus. Okay. Yeah, of course. That's actually a good point. Yeah, there is a famous saying that goes on that if you take a stone and throw it in Bangalore, it probably lands on a developer. Any other guesses? Yell it out loud and see if you can compete with me yelling out without the mic here. Okay. Okay. All right. I would have probably sorry? Huh? 2.75. I'm surprised that you people did not Google it up. But never mind, there are 8 million developers. 8 million, okay, in India. And there are so many contributions that are happening from India to open source, all right? Definitely a lot more. And just sharing the numbers, right? It's phenomenal how much India is contributing to open source itself. If you just take a look at last year, right? Developers in India have made 200 million plus contributions to open source globally. I think that deserves a round of applause for all of you itself. 200 million plus contributions to open source. And you might probably be, thinking that, hey, all right, it's contributions, that's fine, but it's all probably to different open source projects and things like that, right? So, but also just sharing one other interesting, number is that, of course, all of the open source, what's happening, people are not just contributing to projects, but they're also, building new packages like libraries, modules, and projects, etc., right here from India. So in fact, if you look at all the number of software projects in the world, 10 million plus software projects depend on packages created here in India. Okay, 10 million plus. I think that's amazing. So if you just look at the open source ecosystem in India, right, there are so many such amazing projects that are being built here in India, and such a sense of community as well that is definitely coming up. So you take a look at any domain, you take a look at digital identity, MOSIP is here, you take a look at ERP, there is Frappe ERP next, you take a look at developer tools, there's Hopscotch, there's Signos in APM, there's so many different open source projects that are being built right here, in India. And I think one of the main contributing factors also is that people recognize that contribution is not just about code. It's also about a whole lot of different things. You can contribute through code, you can contribute through documentation, you can contribute through design, you can contribute through evangelism, you can contribute through mentoring, you can contribute through a whole lot of different things, which is what is really helping the sense of community and also helping open source, become a lot more better. We probably, are still not yet there, I would say, in sense of community. If you just look at GitHub, right, India is the second largest developer community on GitHub. And someone, in fact, recently asked, hey, why are we not one? Probably there are some insights out here.
So yeah, that's interesting. Now, just throwing it open to anyone. If this is the situation, then question number one: why is there so little visibility of it? Okay. And secondly, what are the blocks that stop others from entering? Maybe Vanshika wants to answer the second, but what about the first? Why so little visibility about the Indian developer? We go into beating our chest that India has been only consuming open source. It's not been contributing back to it. Okay, there seems to be a lack of awareness of what's happening. Does something have to do with the press, with the fact that when we cover IT, we cover it only based on press notes that we receive. We don't have an overview of what's going on or something of that sort? Or is it that we are so defeatist that we don't believe that we could be shaping things, and things have changed, although we don't see the change? And related to it, there's another question that comes up. Someone asked it to me when we were outside. The question on many young people's mind is that, does volunteering, lead to jobs? It's a genuine question. Anyone who wants to.
So I'll just add a few points about, one question is that why we don't have the visibility. The second question was on jobs, whether it helps or not. I'll add one more aspect to it. What is the kind of visibility you can get? Now the first question is that why we don't have the visibility. Okay. What Karan was telling about is the overall contributions what we do from India. Okay. There are various type of contributions. Before this contribution itself, if you see the volume of our software developers in India, this cross section is very small. If you just see the developers in India, the software developers in India, the cross section is very small. What is our students' capability? Is it only professional developers can contribute? Can students not contribute? Our students' population is one of the top in the world. But when we started with Soda Foundation community engagements, one of the things which we realized is that the academia entry to open source from students community, also the faculty community, there is an entry barrier. Because they do not understand what is really open source is and what is the power of open source. This is lacking. There are a lot of communities like Jana's community or Joshua. Many of us are having different communities trying to bridge this gap, but the gap is so vast, right? So we need to take certain actions to cross that barrier so that it can be an integral part of your academic programs. Right now, that is not the case. And many of the cases, contributions are discrete in nature. You don't sustain. You contribute, maybe 3 months you contribute to one project. Then after 3 months you contribute to some other project. That's when I want to say the possibility of open source in terms of jobs, right? First, in terms of jobs, I can tell you that your CV filtration will be at least 50 times better if you do open source contribution. Because you can't simply do open source contribution, right? Because you need to not only code, right? You need to negotiate with the maintainers and push it in your code, right? It has got soft and technical skills. So if I'm a hiring person, if somebody has done a contribution to open source, I can understand that it is not just technical skills. He has a maturity to work with the community, right? So you will definitely get that chance. Second point is that in an interview, you don't need to talk too much about your project. You just give the link. That's enough. So the power of getting job is enormously high if you contribute. Third point I want to add is associated with this visibility part. That any open source project. Today, I think Karan was mentioning about different projects. I just want to go a little higher level, that different technologies, say for example, AML, cloud computing, container, big data, you name any technology today, edge computing, blockchain, the top one technology is through open source project. You take blockchain, there is a top project. You take edge, there is a top project, which is driven by the community. Who is driving this? People like us. Technology is researched and driven by us. Can you believe this? And every one of them is gone through open source. Say for example, in Soda Foundation, the technology direction can be decided by some of us because we lead it. How do you get there? You need to be consistent. You need to be persistently working as a part of that community, involved and grow in the community. If you grow in the community, the global technology research, you can lead. We can lead from India. So this is a possibility of open source.
Fine. If anyone would like to raise some issue at this point, I guess the panel would get a chance to respond to you all. Anything pressing, anything that you feel we are glossing over, we have not covered properly, or the problem areas?
By the way, you want to contribute to open source? You want to contribute to open source? That's not enough.
So I'll add some points to what my fellow speakers spoke about open source. So how many of you consider open source as a learning curve more than an opportunity building, type of a thing? Does anyone understand that it's more of a learning curve? Great. Okay. I recommend everyone to see your open source profile as something like a learning curve. Why? Because I'm someone who has learned and built in public, and that's something I always vouch for. Why? Because opportunities, yes, you will, of course, your portfolio gets better when you start contributing to open source because you have experiences to showcase in public. But then the entire process of you learning comes out better when you're doing it, showing it to public. One way of doing it, having a portfolio, building projects around it. But also you share that thing to your community. And community doesn't begins from Slack or Discord. That's a very big misconception. A lot of people said that if I'm creating a community over a Discord, I'm going to call open source folks or some hyped up name you'll give and you call it a community. It's not that. Community begins where you put contribution and consistency in focus. And that literally stands true for you as well as other members. It doesn't have to be somewhere very specific to on these platforms. As long as you're able to encourage people, you're trying to talk out problems, maybe trying to give mentorship and probably take mentorship from maintainers also. That's a very, very important thing. Regardless of your background and regardless of where you want to go, open source has to become a practice, a part of your everyday learning curve, rather than just becoming that, okay, I'm gonna graduate next year, so I should probably get my portfolio ready. Because people can see that you just started off like 6 months back, but were you doing something more in public that can add a value to your entire thing that you present when you are actually going for a job? And also, I would say through open source, you sometimes realize that maybe this project is not the best for me, so I'm going to try out other projects too. Like you're shifting your focus also on other projects, equally giving them the same value. And also, so there is this thing coming, right? Like in 2 days, we'll have Hacktoberfest. So one whole month, I see everyone is super pumped up. Okay, we're going to contribute to Hacktoberfest, going to get that t-shirt, gonna get some swags and all and showcase to people that I contributed. After that, what would happen? It goes, that Hacktoberfest is gone, October is gone, and people are back on the same normal lives where open source is again some random thing like in technology, right? Especially in India, like outside India, as per what I've seen, people still consider open source something that they celebrate. Today their PR got merged, they'll talk about it, the whatever problems they faced, their PR was not getting, merged. What was the reason? Did anyone try to find out? Probably you might have not gone across the guidelines and worked on your PR. So maybe that's why it was not merged, but people give up. So that's just 2 cents to what he mentioned about how the visibility of open sources, because probably we ourselves, we don't evangelize about projects and our own contributions. Before someone looks to it, we need to give a focus on what we are building and what we are contributing to.
I would like to add a small personal anecdote to that. For the first 8 years of my professional life, I didn't do any open source. I was all doing commercial, closed source software development, maintenance, whatever you want to call it, right? I think the first baby steps I took was raising an issue on a project where I faced something, right? Or documenting a small feature which was not documented in the documentation and raising a PR, right? And I think those baby steps that I took and the mentors that I had who actually helped me through that process really pushed me doing more basically, right? I think that is something, if you want to start at open source, go to a meetup, talk to folks, you'll definitely find a helping hand, and that could be the first stepping stone towards a longer term, becoming a contributor, I would say. And does it help in jobs? Absolutely. I think today almost every org looks at your GitHub profile before looks at your resume, and if it has all the green stars there, right? I think your case is 50% already made.
Fantastic. So some inputs on how to get started and their own experiences. I want to ask people in the hall whether they know, Garg, whether they know before that. Okay, you first.
Hi guys, this could be a bit old school, possibly somebody reminiscing about it. And it's very interesting to see all these people. I mean, 5 years, 10 years and all of that. So just for the record, I have been in the world of open source. I don't say contributing to open source directly, since I should say 1996. And we have been part of the Linux, Bangalore Linux thing, the FOSS.in and all those events. And one of the things that I have seen is there are 2-3 things we talk about contributing to open source. One is contributing to open source directly. As Karan mentioned, you can evangelize, you can do this. But the other thing people talk about is code, as if you're putting your code out onto a project out there for people to see. The other thing is building a product out of the open source. I would also point at using open source libraries, open source technologies, etc. as also being a contribution. And about the community, I don't know, I've been out of the country for almost 2011. Since 2011, I've just come back to Bangalore after 10, 11 years. I got a PhD in the meanwhile on public policy and technology. And one of the things I was trying to figure, at that time, we had a very, very vibrant open source thing in Bangalore. I seriously do not know whether that still exists. We had Atul Chitnis, who unfortunately passed away, who was the spearheading the whole open source Linux revolution here in Bangalore. We had a hotbed, we had FOSS.in for many, many years. I think the last one happened in 2010 or 2006. I don't remember exactly, 2009 or 2010. And there we were building a very, very vibrant community. We had over emails and everything, but I don't know, when I came back, I've still been trying to figure out, you have multiple foundations, you would have JavaScript Evangelist, but you do not have the comprehensive community of the open source folks. The people who meet, who discuss open source, who talk about things. And I think that is something which possibly is also the fact that we really need to get back as individuals, as contributors. Forget about the fact that there are less women, there are more men, there are more men. Let's move beyond those identities, I would say. We had Jessica Prabhakar, who was the spearheading the entire open source thing in Bangalore here. And none of us, I would say, felt that it was being led by a woman. No. It was being led by a fellow enthusiast. And that is, I think, why we have to move beyond all these sort of barriers, whether you are man. We should have more women, definitely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But we should go beyond the fact that we should have women just for the sake, as you said, bring more women, bring your girlfriend, bring your wives in. No. We want people who are really enthused about it. We want girls who can code, who are interested in contributing, and who understand the whole phenomenon. And then at the corporate level, we again have this whole idea that how to so it's a big thing. I mean, I think I've gone over but it's just to say that there are lots of things that we need to possibly come back. We need Atul Chitnis, frankly speaking. We need that guy with that energy who can bring back this whole thing and start a movement again, where we can have multiple foundations. You could make technology foundation, but it's more about connecting at the human level that becomes important. And that is actually what the open source community has largely been about. It doesn't, frankly speaking, though the community is founded in the virtual world, it has to get down to a physical world to become real, for people to really contribute, to get to know themselves on first name terms, to understand each other and get back together. I think that's what we post-COVID, we need to really kickstart. Thank you.
Very interesting point. So yeah. So Sachin Garg, formerly with CDAC, is saying that he's asking the question of what happened to the community which existed, which will need a full session on itself. But that's a very important point and needs to be addressed. Does anyone in this room know of communities that are working well? Could you name them? Would anyone like to tell us a bit, maybe in a sentence or two? Someone raising their hand right at the back, the person in blue.
Hi everyone, my name is Abhas. So Fred, the question you asked about communities which are flourishing well, I think the FSCI Free Software Community of India group is very active. Of course, the India FOSS group led by FOSS United is also pretty active, but these are all, well, they're all islands, I would say. There is significant overlap, but it's everyone trying to do the best that they can. Well, the reason I requested to speak was that, the discussion we've been having here all along has been about contribution. I think a significant fact that we miss out is freedom zero, the freedom to use the software for any purpose. And I think what I've been seeing personally among younger people today is that usage of free software to create free software is going down. A lot more people use proprietary software to create free software, and I don't think that makes any sense. People who are contributing, people who are leading free software projects, they can set the bar, they can be role models of building and using free software by just choosing to use free software. For example, how does it make sense to build communities over Slack and Discord, or not Discord, I think someone said this, I don't know, one of those, Discord, yeah. Those sort of systems, they're proprietary systems, they're owned by organization, they're not federated. Communities grew over mailing lists and IRC and other such systems long back. And then now we are back to using proprietary tools. We're using GitHub, fine, that's okay, but then you can also host your own repository system. You don't have to be there on GitHub. The network effect could be important, but then by continuing to flock onto centralized services, you're not furthering the cause of free software, right? You're not using more free software. I mean, GitHub is proprietary. So are so many other systems that we use to create free software, free Libre open source software. So I think we need to stress on the fact that contribution is not just a goal to have. Using it, being aware of those situations where we don't use it is also equally important. And being able to respect all those systems which are free software and which can help us run our daily lives without using proprietary software would actually give us so many more opportunities to create more software with others. It's just that, earlier, long back, we would take so much effort to use free software to collaborate, to build communities. And today we just take the easy way out. We might use a Telegram group to build and discuss about a community. I don't think that makes sense. Why is it that we need that convenience or ease of use? We are trying to promote free software and usage to everybody else. We're trying to encourage everybody to contribute, and yet we can't set up a simple system to sort of service and build that community and support it. We have to resort to using proprietary software for it. I think that's a conflict. This might look like a very ideological argument, but I think it's important for each of us involved at any level in a project to think about these things and to figure out how we could eliminate more proprietary software out of the process of creating free and open source software. Thank you.
Thanks, Abbas. Thank you.
I just have one reaction on that based on what you mentioned as well. So there are, of course, different layers to open source. There is the layer of a technology, there is the layer of human, there is a layer of policy, there's a layer of license, there's a layer of community, and a whole lot of different things, right? Like how you also mentioned, there is a layer of ideology as well. right? See, my viewpoint is that, and also how he was mentioning, is I feel that we've kind of gone back to the specific action items that's required to keep the momentum going. All right. So drawing an analogy, right? I think we've just as an analogy as a citizen, we've gone past the time where people still talk about Bangalore traffic, right? Now people are talking about, okay, what do we do specifically to address this, right? So kind of similarly, I think people, of course, understand the concept of open source and the different layers to it, which is why we've kind of gone more specialized, right? So no more is the world where, a single doctor can do everything. We need specialized doctors. Similarly, I feel the reason why a lot of communities are specializing is because people are, of course, being more interested. So even if you look at a lot of the community conferences, there is a conference for every language and every framework, and it has equally or even more probably attendance for those conferences because people identify with that and get down to specifics in terms of what they intend to do. I think it's some of those specifics of solving those specific problems that probably led to thousands of contributors, contributing to open source, which ultimately led NASA to put a hovercraft on Mars. So I think those are kind of like really the wins which have been very, very specific. And honestly, I would really love to see such kind of a win for us here in India, where what we are working on open source kind of crosses all of the barriers of technology, of people, of ideology, and also kind of help bring it back to just the citizens and the social good, right? The phones that we're using, the laptops that we have, the screens behind us, the systems powering these lights, probably everything is behind open source, right? But we kind of are also probably have to see how we can get open source to such an extent that it's impacting not just the 8 million developers or many other organizations, but also an end user citizen. And I think great examples of that is, say, a lot of projects which are a part of the Digital Public Goods Alliance and Registry, which is globally recognizes all of the open source projects which are considered as a digital public good. There are so many out here from India. There is DevLake, which does for vaccinations. There is projects like Digit, which does a complete governance. There is also Corona Safe Care, which is something that was done as a war room for tracking COVID. There's a COVID-19 India. So many different projects. I think because the community has kind of crossed many of these layers and really thinking about how we can do specifically with the skill set that we have for the development of literally citizens itself, I think is a very good win for us to celebrate.
We are just running a bit short of time, but Dr. Gard's question still remains of whether we need an overarching movement to take the concept forward in its in the form it was started with. Anyway, if there's some, we will not go into breaking our heads over these fundamental questions, but if there are any last minute questions from the audience which challenge us to think differently or to go forward, we'd like to.
So I just want to know, what is the challenge we are facing in open source? Is it more like we need more contributors to contribute because 8 million seems like a smaller number? Or is it more like businesses are not adopting open source that much, or like smaller companies are not able to get to the pace where they can fight head to head with a SaaS company? Like, where is like the first step we should start with to make sure open source is more mainstream?
So this is something I'm answering from the aspect of SaaS ecosystem. Okay. Like for example, my company, my product is focusing on the smaller and bigger companies both in SaaS and then even open source projects. Okay, that's like an infrastructure code that we are building. But the problem in open source specific to India is not that people are not ready to adopt the culture. Probably someone mentioned, right, that it's proprietary software we need to eliminate. I don't feel that we have to eliminate. I feel that we have to build a trust on those projects. Until those people look into the code base and understand what's actually happening, right? You would not understand that how believable it is. It's something literally like Web3. I don't know how many people are in Web3, but because you are in Bangalore, you might have heard a lot of things around cryptos and investment and about Ethereum merge. Everything happened public, right? People trusted everything. So similarly in open source, when it comes down to SaaS, it also depends on the products, if it would go along with the tech stack that they are using, and if that project is in sync with it. Of course, adopting an open source project, there's a licensing, there are a lot of things that goes in the process, because you cannot just copy paste everything. You have to give that much of incentivization, and you have to showcase that, okay, you're using it. And SaaS products apparently, if they are in Web2 specifically, the code base will be closed, right? So you can never find out if that code in open source is being used by someone. So that's another thing, that they don't want any issues with them using this open source free libraries or something like that. So they always try to showcase. And secondly, about the companies and about what is the actual problem, at least I believe that it is about awareness. It is about how are we looking at it. Look, students specifically, that there's a huge numbers, they know open source, they get to know about that and through GSOC, through other programs in colleges. But do you understand that it's a very long-term thing and not something that you are a student and you're contributing today and then you stop, right? So it's an ongoing process. To get a revolution or something like everyone just starts contributing to it on a very high, rapid, I would say, rate, is something that, okay, you are learning and you are contributing. It's like a simultaneously process. You don't wait that, okay, I will complete my engineering, maybe then I'll stop and I'll do something and then I'll start contributing to certain projects. So we stop ourselves. I am a living proof for that thing, that I thought that maybe I should complete my course and then start looking to the technical space. And I think COVID for some students have turned out to be like a plus point, because they have got extra time on their hands to explore. And while people thought that open source might go down or the development might stop, in COVID itself, there have been so much boom in open source ecosystem itself, because people had time to contribute. So many companies started this remote work culture, so the developers, us as developers, we started contributing to multiple projects, evangelizing about them. So at least that's a problem I see, that how much we, basically contribute and how much we want to encourage ourselves to go about it. The people that is around us, that is our community. Community doesn't begin like when you join someone, you know people, you talk about that, right? So maybe that answers your question.
That's a very interesting insight, Vanshika. Thanks for that. Last, to wind up, maybe half a minute each to the four who have not spoken enough. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think that the point was very relevant in terms of the overarching, do we have that? Definitely one thing. In terms of contributions, I think while the number and quantity may matter, but I think more matters in terms of the value of it. I think we are not promoting the purpose and the value. That is the reason where the contributors are not oriented towards. If I have to take one takeaway from this whole discussion, probably, have a clear purpose and a contribution that makes value. That should.
I mean, I just want to summarize with the entire discussion. So open source is not really a software problem. It's a cultural problem, right? And vast number of people in our nation, being young people, they need the right direction to pursue things. They need the right leaders and the right direction. I think, ecosystems like these, the events like these will actually lead to a certain point where there is more maturity in understanding the ecosystem, and at the same time, how they can develop the ecosystem further, because they are going to be the future maintainers or the future sustainers of these projects. So they need the right base and understanding. I think, you can also meet the panelists later, even during the break, so we can have more insightful discussion. So because we are out of time. Yeah, thank you.
A round of applause for the panel if you think they deserve it.